I think perhaps one of the most saddening things about, conversations around babies around outside of wedlock, right? I don't think it's about babies outside of wedlock, you know, circumstances as much as I think so much of the shame coming from the black community, within the black community rather, in regards to single parents, right? Because we don't feel this way about white mothers and white women who divorce all the time, right? Quite frankly, divorce has become so normalized in our society because white women were divorcing, right? We know that on average, black women aren't getting married at such alarming rates, right? For a myriad of reasons and for factors outside of their control. And so white women were the ones that were divorcing, and they were also the ones who were being seen as victorious and empowered, right? It's kind of like during the 1950s, right? And you've got white women, they're fighting for feminism and their own, said rights or whatever, whereas black communities are trying to hold on to their neighborhoods because now, state officials and government officials, right, and federal, you know, uh, representatives are deciding to build highways within their communities, right? And so the fight has never really been the same. And I think that's what we're kind of seeing today. And so one of the things that I have a lot of compassion for, and I want to say this, I think for many black women and girls, it's unfortunate thing because I think when you talk about single motherhood, I don't necessarily think it's always a lack of resources. I think we have to start focusing on the mental and emotional state of the mother. And so when you are a young woman and you talk about accountability, because that's a lot of the conversation today, right? We talk about accountability. I think for all black people, right? But in this context, in regards to mothers, being a black woman and a black girl is very hard, right? Black youth, more specifically, being a black child, right? It's very hard because you do have a very unspoken set of expectations that are placed on you, which is to essentially know better, but without having any wisdom or oftentimes guidance to actually do better. And so that is a very, very heavy thing. And I think what a lot of women today were partaking in, we start talking about soft life, the politics of Pilates and the proximity to white spaces and white beauty regimens or whatever, is it's really black women trying to reclaim that sense of girlhood. What was I watching? I don't know about. Oh, I was watching Mean Girls yesterday, and I just was thinking about the very different teen experience from being a white young woman, right, white adolescent girl versus being a black adolescent girl, and it's really unfortunate because I think just with mainstream media, so many of our voices and the truth of our realities get siloed out, right? It gets kind of flattened and fabricated into entertainment, and the severity of it, I'm sorry, is not really taken with regard. You know what I mean? And so I'm saying all this to say, I think the conversations are more so critical, but I think it's because when you're talking about African American people and African American communities, there really is no time for grief, oftentimes because there's not a lot of resources for grief. And so we criticize and we, try to strengthen one another in our critique and, correction, because we really don't have time to kind of lament and gently correct to get it right. Like it's so costly for us, right? The consequences of the choices that we make as young women and young men, it's so costly, right? We don't get that second chance. We oftentimes don't even get a first chance, right, to really make a mistake, right? Every decision costs us everything, whether that's the being expelled from school, whether that's being incarcerated, like whatever, whether that's the life altering circumstances where you become a single mom very early on. And so I think what we're seeing today, and I think what has been a very hardening thing and a very disheartening thing within our community and the lives of women and girls, is that you really have this person who had to survive so early on and it just never stopped, right? I would akin black girls and the reproductivity and all the different things, like I would akin that to black boys and the school to prison pipeline, right? Our environments absolutely dictate what happens to us, and a lot of times it's outside of our control. And so, yeah, when we make when these things happen, right, when these circumstances present themselves to us, it's very costly, right? And it doesn't just cost us, but it sometimes costs our children as well. And so, when you see children snapping. You see children, committing murder and all these different things. Are there some children that are just absolutely unhinged? Yes. But I think what we're seeing, and what we're really kind of shining a light on within society today is more so the mental health of a lot of people. And I just think when you start talking about black children and the ongoing attack of like mothers, the lack of regard for the mental and emotional capacity of mothers, the lack of regard for the mental and emotional capacity of many people, right? But specifically black women in this case. I don't know. I just don't think it's ever regarded, but that absolutely affects everything. And for so many black children, right, who then become adults, you're carrying grief for years, right? You're carrying grief for centuries. You know what I mean? Like, it's not even just you. Now you're carrying your mother stuff. And, we do go to therapy and we have conversations around mental health and communal wellness. And a lot of times we're veering on two ends of the extreme. We say things like, well, grandmama didn't have this and then mama didn't have that. Right. But then here you are as a child, as a young woman, as a young man, and you need your parents and you don't get to be parented. Right. You have to then be stronger than that because they can't give you whatever it may be. You know what I mean? And so I just think you're dealing with a very unique experience, and it's a lot more common, right, when you start talking about the black community versus other communities, and again, for a lot of factors outside of one's control. And so I say all that to say, be kind to one another. Right. I say all that to say, be kind to one another. I don't think people realize that so many people are on their last leg, quite frankly, right? A lot of people are just at their wits' end. Like I said, for so many of us, the mistakes that we make, whether it's a life-altering decision such as like, child rearing, or maybe it's just a minor mistake in the eyes of the grand scheme of things, or in the grand scheme of things, but because you're black, because of the resources, because of the lack of support, or rather really the lack of resources in your life, that mistake costs you so much more than the next person, right? We are people who are riddled with numerous setbacks, right? If it's not, our own choices and the environment that influences those choices, you're dealing with things at, state levels, you're dealing with, authorities and things like that coming at you. So it's a very arduous life, right, to be a black person. And I think that's something that I want to kind of expound upon and work more on, especially just talking about our emotional states, not just as women, but as black men as well. And y'all know me, I truly believe that the experiences are very synonymous. I think as much as we like to try to diversify and we like to have these conversations where we're always keeping black men over here and black women over there, our issues are the same. We start having conversations about men and emotional availability and mental health and all these different things. And, we start to say things like, well, men have feelings too, and men are this too. Then it's time that we start to have conversations in a more collective manner versus in a divisive manner. Because if we're all feeling anxiety, if we're all feeling angst, if we're all grieving the childhood we didn't get, if we're all grieving, right, the relationships that didn't work out, the support that we never had, then why are we having conversations in two separate rooms, right, when we need to be coming together, especially when some of the healing can take place by having healthier relationships with men and women, right? Men and women, I think, need healthier relationships with one another. And so, my focus is more so like bringing people together to talk about it at a fundamental level. Like, I'm not really here to get into the very specific differences of, what it is to be a man and what it is to be a woman. I'm more so say, hey, listen, we all feel this. We all feel anger. We all feel these things, right? And so let's talk about it. Let's more so have that type of conversation. Let's shine a light on it. And at the very least, let's acknowledge it, versus keeping people in two separate rooms and kind of doing this thing where it's like, one person becomes the enemy. You know what I mean? Because there really is no enemy, but, the enemy that has sought to destroy our communities, quite frankly, and continues to seek to destroy our communities. And so I find it not very surprising, where we are today and just, the state of the world, situation recently with the young man I was listening to. He's a defense attorney. I can't think of his name. I'm so sorry. I actually follow him on here. Oh, Defiant Lawyers. He's part of the he founded actually the Defiant Lawyers Network. And he was talking about the situation in regards to Anthony Hamilton. And I think just quite naturally, any race of people are going to see a child and they're going to see a child in that way. Right. So, no bias is there. I was just very intrigued to kind of know what happened. I was actually reading last night, an article, I think it was a news article, and they was talking about, the sentencing and everything. And I was like, reading what happened. And It was just a very unfortunate thing. Very unfortunate for the child, very unfortunate for the child that lost their lives, just very unfortunate, like I said, for the state of the world. I don't think we realize, like I said, what people are carrying. And most importantly, I think we can look at this, not just as this single crime, but the crimes that have taken place within, high schools and amongst teenagers and kids in general. And we got to really start having conversations about bullying. That's why I've been kind of talking to you guys more and more about like, what are we normalizing? Because this is not okay, right? The people that come online that you're attacking, these are real people, you know what I mean? And we don't have a space anymore to shake off some of that social media weight, right? People are online every day, all day, right? People don't have a space where they can say, hey, I'm going to go to this place or I'm going to go to this place, right? And I can hang out with my friends. No, people's friends are online. People are streaming online. People are meeting online. People are building communities online, right? Like people aren't really getting much interaction outside of that. And so, online bullying is a very real thing. It's very serious. We have to be mindful what we say. And then even in real life, you got to teach your kids that. Teach your kids, you got to teach your kids. Don't be bullying people. You know what I mean? You keep your hands to yourself. You mind your business. You know what I mean? You don't teach your kids to treat people that way because you just never know, right? Like I said, especially when we're living in a day and age where children are getting access to how the other side lives. And I've been telling y'all this from the beginning. We've never before seen inside of these fancy homes. There was a point in time, right, when we would drive through white neighborhoods and we would see how nice it was. We seen that they was, maybe we just assumed maybe they was lawyers, doctors. We thought maybe it was possible for us. But now information is out there. Right? Children are starting to see why are they so economically disenfranchised, right? What has taken place within this country that has led to our people specifically being the more disenfranchised group than everybody else. You know what I mean? People's parents is checked out. People's parents having to work 2-3 jobs. They got all this housing going on, all this gentrification within the communities, right? People can't even afford to pay their rent. They don't care. And it's hard when you look at the people who are in positions of power. And these are the things that they voted for. These are the things that they are, condoning. These harm and the punishing of black people, hardworking people. You see what I'm saying? So it's a very real time. It's a different time. People aren't in the dark anymore. You know what I mean? So we have to tread lightly when we're dealing with human beings right now. People are incredibly fragile. And like I said, in regards to the state of the emotional state of the homes and the lives that the children grow up in, right? The emotional environments, the mental, environments that children grow up around. So many of us go without many needs never being met, right? Relationships failings, things like that not working out. It's never just a matter of it just didn't work out. Right. It's always much more costly for a person who's already, struggling with so much and who's already at a deficit. Right. A loss never really feels like a loss. Right. It's harder to bounce back from setbacks when it's a continual setback after another. Right. And there is no cushion. So let us be mindful how we engage with one another. I just wanted to come on and share the light in regards to that. We're going to have more conversations. I hope that this was insightful. I know this was quick. You guys have a great day. Peace.